It's now time for business updates around the continent. Rotus Oduri is here. Rotus, great to have you.
Yes, good morning, Rufai. Good morning, Ayo. Good morning, Dr. Rufai, congrats, you nailed it. They hiked the rates. I thought they would hold it. The MPC, Monetary Policy Committee, did in fact hike the benchmark interest rate by 100 basis points to 16.5%. Inflation continues to be the main target of the Monetary Policy Committee, as is the case around the world. Kenya is meeting later on, I think it's today or tomorrow. They're expected to hike their rates as well. So now you're looking at it on screen, 16.5% from 15.5 back in September. In July, it was at 13%. In May, it was 14% in July. Then in May, it was 13 from 11.5. So cumulatively now, it's now about 500 basis points in total that we've seen, that the increase that we've seen. And if we look at the parameters of the increase, so the asymmetric corridor has been, pretty much all the other metrics are unchanged. Asymmetric corridor remains plus 100 minus 700 basis points around the rates. Cash reserve ratio, that was increased last time in September from 27.5 to 32.5. The IMF notably is in support of that. Liquidity ratio remains at 30%. So the metrics remain the same. But again, as we've said, repeatedly, if you look at the inflation figures, that continues to rise. So it's a case of whether or not will you still continue to chase after inflation, 21.09%. In fact, if you look at the headline numbers year on year, they've all increased across the board. Now, what the Central Bank Governor Gordon Emefiele mentioned yesterday, month on month, if we go to month on month inflation, you will see a deceleration. Headline 1.24 from 1.36. You're seeing a deceleration in food, core, which strips out volatile items, and urban and rural as well. So that's what they're anchoring their strategy on in that month on month, which is more closely used by analysts to gauge how prices of goods and services are moving. That's what they're using. So again, we'll continue to see when we get the inflation figures for October. We will now see. For November, we'll see whether or not the trajectory remains. But if you look at the price pressures and what we're facing, especially those floods came at the worst possible time. So that again is an issue, although they've been receding, and the central bank governor did mention that. You just talked to Dr. Hassan Mahmood, so not much to add here, but just to add that the Naira note deadline is firm. The central bank governor said that they're not moving. He mentioned that yesterday at about another half hour or so, President Buhari at the Federal Executive Council will be unveiling those new notes. You already jumped into that. And then you guys really did good work on, Fidelity Bank. They are extending their hours, I think from 8 to 6 to accommodate the redesign. They're the first bank to come out and say that they're doing so. We expect that other banks will do the same. Remember, the central bank directed them to even open on weekends, on Saturday, to allow for this. The central bank also has agents around the country. I think the central bank governor said they've got over 1 million, 1.5 or so, especially for the rural areas, to allow people to swap the cash that they need and get credit for their own needs.
operators and the like.
Exactly. They're trying to put them across. I don't have much to add on the drilling. You three, Ayo, you in particular, you folks really went into the questions around this. That $3 billion. Nigeria's total capital importation in 2021 was 6.7 billion. If you want to get even more granular, FDI was about $700 million. So this 3 billion that they've announced, and again, it's coming from the government in the same way the Nigeria Air national carrier thing of the whole metrics around who was the majority shareholder, that also came from the government on the aviation side. We really do need to see where this 3 billion is. So within context, when these figures get thrown around, $3 billion just for this project that the government say they have attracted is 50% of the total capital importation that came into the country last year, and it's even way more. So again, it's good news, but in an era where companies are moving away from fossil fuels, you've got a project like this. Congrats. We'll see how far that goes. And then Kenya Airways and South African Airways, they had a pact to float a new Pan-African operation, but they are both facing a whole lot of losses. The consortium that was supposed to take a 51% shareholding in South Africa Airways, the head, he quit. I think it was yesterday or the day before, saying that there was a lack of transparency into the deal. Kenya Airways, they still have a number of hurdles in terms of how to offset the losses, but they want to move away from national carrier. In fact, we have a quote from an official in the Kenyan government which I guess speaks to the whole national carrier matter as far as aviation is concerned. He said it's time to relook the national carrier and ensure that it continues to operate without government support. We need to bring in a strategic investor. That's Mr. Chris Kiptu, who is the nominee to the office of Principal Secretary of the Kenyan National Treasury. So that's our update for Africa.
And it goes back to this tweet or this message, because you see, when you ask what is a national carrier, something that carries your national name, I think there could be that level of symbolism where, if you couple together an airline, not really with the government involvement, because government has shown they don't know how to run things properly, it still carries the national name.
Right.
Is BA owned by the British government?
No, it's not.
No. I think we should start having a change in perspective of this national carrier and things like that. You could get a couple of airlines. I think there's still one airline that is...
Aero Contractors.
No,
ARIC, under
AMCON. So why don't you just change and put it Nigeria Air there? Simple. So why are you trying to couple together another thing? I mean, people just like to waste money, just like the over 500K they wasted on the Fambro Air Show with the logo and the design. Which
that wasn't done by a Nigerian.
Yeah, this was just money in the air, and they wasted that money at Fambro Air Show. They should still account for that money. That's what we're saying. Concerning, what is it called, the oil deal.
The drilling,
like we said, kudos to them. But I said something.
Yep.
I said Sterling Global, the Sansari brothers.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't say much more than that. Go check it up.
The key thing about the Kolmani fields that we have raised is that, look, they still need to give us more information in terms of the technical details. Because we're told that this integrated oil and gas operation is 2 BP. 2 BP means all those figures, about 1 billion reserves and all of that. Those are probable reserves. If you target 2 BP, it's a proven reserves. Okay, so we need that information in addition to some of the other questions that we raised during the headlines. Otherwise, if they're able to go ahead with it and have proven reserves and really strike the oil and the gas, then of course it will be good news. But I don't want to dwell on it too much. Now, as for the Monetary Policy Committee increasing MPR, which is the rate at which central banks borrow from the central bank, by 100 basis points. Well, I thought that was to be expected. But yesterday you said, maybe they will take an accommodative stance. But this is the 4th time this year that the Central Bank of Nigeria has taken a hawkish stance. And that should not be surprising. This same morning, the Reserve Bank of New Zealand, they increased their own basic rate by about 0.75 percentage points to 4.25%. And what the CBN governor of New Zealand said, it's not different from what our own CBN governor is saying, that there is high inflation. As inflation is going on, you have to be proactive and control contraction within the economy. And that's precisely what the CBN would seem to have done also here locally. But people who have fixed deposits, fixed securities, they seem to be gaining. Their interest is going up, isn't it? And the government is saying it wants to encourage investment, particularly in Naira, instead of in foreign dollars. So let's see, 4th consecutive tightening, how does it work out? The food inflation that we expect to be higher by December, how do these policies help to ease the burden?
Indeed.
That's the question.
Indeed.
Well, for me, there were some questions I wanted to ask Dr. Hassan. Unfortunately, we had a constraint in time, and now we have a time constraint as well. But the only thing I was just going to point out is some of the things you talked about with regards to, encouraging more people, the addressing hoarding and mopping up cash, liquidity in circulation, is that we keep talking about these things, but there are other issues that the CBN must address. One is that there's still many unbanked Nigerians. There was a criticism of the fact that people who live in rural areas, the time limit was too short, and our time limit is short now.
Speaking of time, thank you so much.